Welcome to the How To Podcast series. I see you there. Well, technically I can't see you, but you're there. Hi, I'm Dave. I want to talk to you today about the editing process of your podcast. And I know there's some amazing tools out there. I'm not throwing shade on any of these tools, but I have a cautionary tale to share with you as you use these tools on maybe how you can use them better. And I was a guest on a podcast. They used these tools and they made me sound like I was running in a marathon and in a hurry and out of breath. And I want to share a clip from the podcast to let you hear what I sounded like on their show. And then I'm going to play the same clip again. And it's going to be edited. And I'm actually going to fix what technology did to my episode. And I'm going to make it sound a little more listenable here on the How to Podcast series. Are you ready? It's Dave versus AI. Ding, ding. Here we go. Let's see who wins. So in this corner is AI with all their fancy dancy tools that will take out silence, that will shorten and truncate conversation, making things feel quite rushed, quite abrupt, and less human. That's AI in that corner. And then you have Dave over here in this corner who prefers to sound like Dave, including pauses like that, where I like to include some cadence, a little bit of gallop. Think of a horse galloping through the fields, and it's gorgeous, and there's this beautiful music playing, and the horse is galloping along or cantering, that kind of thing. There's this kind of built-in little gallop to our voices. And love it or not, but AI is out there on a mission to remove a little of the humanity of our podcast. And by no means am I throwing shade on my podcast guesting experience in this episode I'm going to share with you, because the host was fabulous. I got to share my dad's story with another new audience, and I loved my episode. Great content, great host. Nothing taken away from the host from this example by any means. Grateful for every opportunity to be a guest on a podcast. If I could be a guest on your show, I would love to. I'd love to come on and help and support you grow your audience. Let me know. But I'm going to play you a clip from the episode. And this episode, I could tell the moment I pushed play for the first time that it was highly edited with a software program that removes silence, truncates the breaks between words, and made it a little choppy. So I'm going to play the episode as it was and as it's been released. I'll have a link to the episode as well in the show notes. You can hear the entire interview. And again, I love to support that host in the podcast. Links in the show notes. But I'm going to give you a snippet from the episode. And then I'm going to give you the same snippet, but I've fixed it in the sense that I put some of the humanity back in by adding in silence, by breaking things up a little bit. And I want you to judge with your ears and understand that if you're going to use AI or a tool to help you in your editing, be very cautious that it doesn't remove the humanity of the conversation. So here we go. I'm going to play you the episode, a clip of the episode right now that has been edited through AI, and you can get a sense of how does this make you feel as a listener when you hear my voice and how I talk in this episode to what you've just heard in the last few minutes here on this podcast, in how I present myself, how I include pauses, and how I kind of present my content in comparison to what you're going to hear now from my guesting episode. Here you go. And I want you to judge with your ears. Are you ready? Here you go.
I thought I knew what I was doing. I had no idea. And I think that's probably part of the reason why I started my podcast for dads as well, is I wanted to talk to men and tell them they're going to be okay, because I didn't have something like that. I had my parents, I had family and friends, but after a while they all go home and you're sitting there with a crying baby at 3 a.m. trying to figure out, what am I doing wrong? And there's no one to ask. And you're a little afraid to ask for help because you don't want people to see you as a failure as a dad. So you try to do your best. And my wife needs me, my son needs me, but I need time for me as well as a dad. And what I love about what you're doing is you're putting a spotlight on the dad I was with my first child, in that I really struggled to find my place in life because I didn't know who I was as a dad. And I felt a little neglected in the sense that my wife would go to all these amazing parties and celebrations for the birth of my son. She would take him and go and get presents and come home, and I wasn't invited. And I felt kind of like, but I'm part of this too.
So there's an example for you there. Now, some just initial thoughts. Again, I love the podcast. I love the opportunity to go on the show. Exciting for me to share my dad's story. I got to talk about things I don't normally get to talk about by being a guest. So again, by no means am I throwing any shade on any podcast for how they do their edits, but I wanted to give you just a comparison for you to consider if you choose to use AI or a tool or maybe an editor to do your edits for you, about what that feels like for a listener. Now, as I listened to my episode, I listened to it with my wife, Jennifer, when I heard it come out. And we both had this feeling like it felt like I was rushed in my response to questions. It felt like I was short, and that my words really kind of bashed up against each other, and there wasn't a lot of space. There wasn't a lot of pause. We normally do that when we talk, and especially when we're not reading. Just having a conversation, recording like I'm doing right now, I have no script in front of me. I'm just talking to you. And when you talk to people, you actually put breaks in, you think about the next thing you're about to say. It's kind of built into how we talk. And some of the tools that are available to us as podcasters, again, are great. They do help us edit. They help us to create our content and get it out to the world. And when you don't have editing capabilities, you haven't done this before, it feels hard to edit. And that's why people will hire people. So I've talked about this in other episodes. I love helping people learn how to edit and taking people from zero skill set and helping them learn and gain confidence on how to do this. So I'm going to take that exact same clip that I just shared with you now, and I redid that clip for you, and I'm going to drop it in here. And I want you to just listen to the difference between what it sounded like originally and how I, using editing software, not AI, but ears, a mouse, keyboard, and a computer, how I brought some of the humanity back into the conversation so that it didn't feel so rushed. I would love to get your feedback. What do you prefer as a listener? And I would love to get your thoughts on what you're using for your software, for your editing. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a program. But how did you feel when you listened to the first version of this episode, where I was being a guest, and the second? What did it mean to you as a listener? So here you go. Here's that same portion of my interview, but with a little bit of humanity brought back into it, with how I have added some silence back to my response in the interview. Here you go.
Completely inadequate. I thought I knew what I was doing. I had no idea. And I think that's probably part of the reason why I started my podcast for dads as well, is I wanted to talk to men and tell them they're going to be okay, because I didn't have something like that. I had my parents, I had family and friends, but after a while they all go home and you're sitting there with a crying baby at 3 a.m. trying to figure out, what am I doing wrong? And there's no one to ask. And you're a little afraid to ask for help because you don't want people to see you as a failure as a dad. So you try to do your best. And my wife needs me. My son needs me. But I need time for me as well as a dad. And what I love about what you're doing is you're putting a spotlight on the dad I was with my first child, in that I really struggled to find my place in life because I didn't know who I was as a dad. And I felt a little neglected in the sense that my wife would go to all these amazing parties and celebrations for the birth of my son. She would take him and go and get presents and come home. And I wasn't invited. And I felt kind of like, but I'm part of this too.
So there's a little example then. So did it feel different for you? I hope you can tell the difference between the first clip and the second clip. And all I really did was take silence and insert it where the cuts were and expanded it. And I added, when I redid the entire episode, putting in these breaks, putting these pauses that are natural to our human speech when we talk to each other like this, that by putting in the silence back in, the extra episode got longer. And again, if the best you have is an AI tool that can do the edits for you because you don't know how to do editing, then use that. But just understand how it feels to an audience member who's listening to your podcast, that the listening experience, when it's heavily edited and all of the silence is removed and words bang up against each other and there's no cadence, there's no gallop to the voice, there's no pause, there's no thought between comment 1 and comment 2. All of that stuff that makes us as humans, when you remove that from your podcast, it has a jarring effect to your listener, and anxiety levels actually amp up a little bit because as a listener, I don't have a chance to think about what you just said because you're already saying the next thing. And I feel like I'm being rushed through the interview as a listener. So that's my challenge for you, is to listen back to some of your edited podcast. And do you feel anxious as a listener to your own show? And some people might listen to my show and say, Dave, you speak too slowly. And well, that's my show. And that's who I am. And if you met me at a restaurant or an event and you spoke to me, I would sound exactly like this because this is how I talk. So that's me. And I just have this feeling that AI and our reliance on AI can lead to the potential of making episodes that sound very choppy and very less human-like in the long term. So if you're looking for help with your podcast and you're looking for an editor, I have my hand up. I'm actually looking to add some new clients to my schedule to do the edits for you. So you record the episode and I'll take care of the rest. That's something I'm offering right now, and I'm trying to do it on a budget-friendly basis so that you aren't overwhelmed with cost. Because when I look out in this landscape of editors, it's borderline ridiculous when I see how much people are charging. That's not what I'm interested in doing, but I would love to help you. And then if you don't use my services and you go with an AI alternative, then maybe ramp down the amount of edits that happen within your podcast so that it doesn't feel overly edited and doesn't feel so smashed together. And if you're not sure where you fit on that scale between over-editing and not enough, maybe, I'd love to help you. I'll listen to your podcast for you. I do this thing called the podcast review thing where I listen to your show and I give you feedback on your podcast. And instead of releasing my feedback to the world without you having the chance to review it, I give you my feedback. I give you the episode in advance and ask for your permission to release my thoughts on your podcast. I promote your show. I give feedback for your show. And it's a way to advertise your podcast with some feedback from a guy named Dave, who actually does care about you. And I'm not here to make fun of you. I'm here to build you up and give you some coaching on how to make your show better. If you're interested in that, howtopodcast.ca, leave me a message, and I'd love to speak with you. Keep the humanity in your podcast. And when you reach out to do editing and you reach out to plan your show, just remember your listener and make it a great experience for them as they listen to your show. howtopodcast.ca is the website. I would love to connect with you on your show and be a resource for you going forward. Let me know how I can help you to get your message into the world. Thank you for listening to the How to Podcast series. I'm Dave. I'll see you next time. Take care.